In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. The numbers don't lie, but they do demand an answer. I want to start tonight the way I always start when the data gets heavy, slowly. I want to be here with you for a minute before we get into the numbers, because the numbers deserve a proper room, and I've been sitting in that room for a long time tonight. It's late. I'm here in Lithia Springs, Georgia. It's the kind of late where the rest of the world has gone quiet and all you've got left is the screen in front of you and whatever God put in your chest when he made you who you are. And I've been looking at polling data, election maps, Pew Research reports, economic projections, and I keep feeling two things at the same time: a warning and an invitation. A warning that we're at a hinge point, one of the moments where history decides which way it swings, and an invitation because hinge points are also opportunities. If you're awake enough to see them, you read my midterm blog posts. If you read my midterm blog post, you already know I told you these numbers were coming. I laid out the foundational framework earlier this cycle. I told you what was at stake, what the fault lines were, and where I believed the pressure would build. Tonight, we're going to walk through them together, slowly, clearly, and honestly. No shouting, no panic, just truth, because truth is the only currency worth spending in a moment like this. So let's spend it well. Let me start where I think we have to start: the gender gap. Because what I'm seeing in the July 26 Pew Research data is something that should stop every single person in this country dead in their tracks, regardless of party, regardless of ideology. Nationally, men are now polling at 41% Democrat and 42% Republican. Women are polling at 45% Democrat and 33% Republican. That is a 12-point gender divide in party preference, and it is not a statistical anomaly. It is a structural shift. It is a country that is splitting along gender lines in ways that we have not seen in the modern era of American politics. Now, why does that matter for November 3rd? It matters because we're looking at a House of Representatives that sits at 220 Republicans to 215 Democrats, a nice edge. We're talking about races that will be decided by hundreds of votes in some districts, not thousands. And in those margins of error races, a 12-point gender gap is not a talking point. It is a deciding factor. Women are driving Democrats towards viability in tight suburban districts. Men, are particularly younger men, are drifting towards the Republican column in ways that are real and measurable and demand an honest response. And Democrats who refuse to have that honest conversation are going to learn its cost on election night. What is pulling women towards Democrats? Look at the policy landscape. Healthcare, Medicaid, reproductive rights. The 2025 reconciliation bill included cuts to Medicaid that are still reverberating through communities all over this country. And women feel those cuts in immediate, visceral ways. Because women are disproportionately the caregivers, the primary users of the system, the ones sitting in waiting rooms and managing prescriptions and fighting insurance companies. When you cut the safety net, you're cutting the rope that a lot of women are holding. They know it, and they vote like they know it. What is pulling men away? This is a harder, more uncomfortable conversation, and I want to have it plainly without defensiveness, because I think a lot of commentary on the left has flinched from it, and that flinching has cost us. There's a genuine economic frustration among men, particularly among working class men, particularly among men without college degrees, and yes, I have to say it clearly, particularly among Black men. The cultural messaging from the Democratic Party has at times felt to a lot of men like it was speaking around them or talking at them rather than to them. That is real. I'm not dismissing it. It's real. We'll come back to it. Now, let me talk about Black voter loyalty, because the numbers here are the ones that have me up at 2 o'clock in the morning in Lithia Springs, staring at a screen. In 2024, Black voters went for the Democratic candidate at 85%. That's down from 92% in 2020. This is a 7-point drop in a single cycle. And now, in July 2026, Pew data, we're seeing 68% Democratic identification among Black voters, with 8% identifying as Republican. That is not a gradual drift. That is a seismic shift, at least on paper. But here's the question. I want you to sit with this before you even hit the panic button. Is what we're seeing a preference erosion, meaning people actually change their minds and move to the Republican Party, or is it a mobilization gap, meaning the same people who have always leaned Democratic have simply disengaged from the process and stopped identifying with any party at all? Because those are two completely different problems requiring two completely different solutions. And when I look at the 2024 data carefully, really carefully, what I see is I do not see primarily a vote switching story. The bigger problem in 2024 was not that Black voters flipped to Trump. It was that Black voters in significant numbers stayed home. They stayed home. The turnout dropped. The enthusiasm wasn't there. And when people disengaged, the polling captures this disengagement as ideological movement, when it's really just exhaustion. That distinction matters enormously as we think about what November 3rd, 2026 requires from us. Now I want to go deep on the Black male votership, because this deserves its own moment of honesty. In 2020, 87% of Black men voted for Joe Biden. In 2024, 79% of Black men voted for Kamala Harris. That is an 8-point drop in a single presidential cycle. And I want you to understand what that means statistically. That is the largest single cycle drop among any major demographic group in the modern era of American electoral politics. The largest in a single cycle that did not happen in a vacuum. There is real economic frustration at the root of this. Black men disproportionately work in sectors that were hit hardest by inflation and supply chain disruption. The cost of housing, groceries, gas, these are not abstract economic indicators for a Black man trying to take care of his family. They are the conversation at the kitchen table. And when the messaging from Washington felt more focused on cultural identity battles than on economic relief, when the political party that Black men have voted for reliably for 60 years seemed to be struggling to articulate a clear, direct economic argument, the silence created a vacuum, and in that vacuum, other voices moved in. Now, I want to say something that some people are going to push back on, but I believe it needs to be said. I understand the frustration. I do. I was born in it. I live in it. I have family members who embody it. But I also have to ask the hard question that good commentary demands. What did those 8 points buy? For the Black men who either voted for the other side or stayed home in 2024, what improved? What policy changed in your favor? What program expanded? What investment came into your neighborhood? Because the numbers I'm looking at right now, the DOGE cuts, the Medicaid reductions, the disproportionate federal workforce layoffs tell me a very specific story about who absorbed the cost of that protest vote. And it wasn't Wall Street. Let me talk about the economy as the central nervous system of this midterm, because everything runs through it. Inflation is currently sitting at 3.5% a year over year as of July 26. Gas prices are rising. Morgan Stanley is projecting GDP growth of 2.3% for 2026, which is a positive, but it is not the kind of positive number that makes people feel good at the pump. And then there are the DOGE cuts. And this is where the data becomes not just political, but deeply personal. 18.5% of the federal workforce is Black. Compare that to 12% in the private sector. The federal government has historically been one of the most reliable pathways to middle-class stability for Black Americans. Steady pay, benefits, pension, and a degree of protection from the kind of at-will discrimination that has defined too much of the private sector experience. When you gut the federal workforce, you're not cutting bureaucracy evenly. You're cutting into Black middle class with surgical precision. And then layer on top of that, 21% of all Medicaid enrollees are Black. When the 2025 reconciliation bill cut Medicaid funding, 21% of those people whose health care was affected were Black. So I want to ask this question plainly. and I want you to hear it clearly. When they cut the budget, who bleeds first? The answer is not abstract. The answer is Black federal workers. The answer is Black Medicaid recipients. The answer is the Black grandmother in Fulton County whose home health aide just had her hours cut. The answer is the Black veteran in Cleveland who can't get an appointment because the VA clinic lost 3 staff members to the reduction in workforce. These are my political talking points. These are people. And if we're going to be serious about mobilizing Black communities to vote in November, we have to connect the policy to be lived to the lived experience in terms that are direct and real, not in terms that feel like campaign literature. Let me now give you the regional picture because the national landscape requires context. The House sits at 220 Republicans to 215 Democrats. Republicans are defending more toss-up districts than Democrats going into November, which gives Democrats a structural opening that is real, but it is not automatic. It has to be worked in the South. Republicans hold significant advantages. Tennessee has a GOP supermajority, so entrenched that it doesn't register as competitive. In the Midwest, Ohio is the key pressure point. In the West, there are pickup opportunities in suburban districts that flip red in 2024, and the overall Democratic strategy is built on 2 pillars: protecting every single seat they currently hold and picking off vulnerable Republicans in suburban and exurban districts where the gender gap creates a natural disadvantage or a natural advantage. On the Senate side, the math is steep but not impossible. Democrats need to flip 4 seats, and they are targeting Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, Maine, and Texas. That is a 5-state map for a 4-seat pickup. Every single one of those races matters. There is no margin for error, and the question of whether Black voters in the South show up in Georgia and in North Carolina especially is not a subplot. It is the main story. Let me talk about Georgia, and I want to be honest with you. This one is personal. I live here. I drive these roads. I know what this state's political soil feels like underfoot. Georgia has a 30% Black electorate. 30% electorate. That is extraordinary. That is a built-in structural advantage for Democrats that require activation to function. Fulton County is the engine. It is the single most important jurisdictional unit in the entire state. When Fulton County turns out at 70% or above, Democrats are competitive statewide. When it doesn't, they're not. It is that clean. The Abrams-era voter registration infrastructure, which added over 800,000 new voters to Georgia's rolls between 2018 and 2020, is still the foundational architecture of democratic viability in this state. But infrastructure is not self-sustaining. It requires energy, maintenance, and investment. And with Brian Kemp as governor, a Republican state Senate holding a 33-22 advantage, and the Warnock Senate seat on the line, the pressure is immense. The NAACP is running targeted outreach through barbershops and community centers specifically aimed at Black men in the 25 to 45 age range cohort. That is exactly the right play. That is meeting people where they are. And as someone who lives here, I want to say this clearly. The work being done on the ground in Georgia right now is serious. It deserves to be met with serious turnout. North Carolina is the state that Democrats have been almost winning for a generation. And it is time to talk about why the almost never becomes a yes. North Carolina has an open Senate seat this cycle. Josh Stein sits in the governor's mansion as a Democrat. That matters for state level operations and for the credibility of Democratic governance in that state. But the legislature is split. Republicans hold a 30-20 advantage in the state Senate, while Democrats hold a House majority. It is a state in genuine tension, and the Black voter concentration in the triad, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and High Point, and in the Charlotte metro area, represents the kind of concentrated Democratic base that, when activated, can move statewide numbers. A North Carolina Senate flip would be among the most significant political events in the 2026 cycle. It would reorder the entire national political conversation about where the South is going. And then there is Tennessee. And I want to spend a moment here because Tennessee is not a battleground. I will not pretend it is. The Republican supermajority is real. 27-6 in the state Senate. 75-24 in the House, with Bill Lee entrenched as governor. There is no statewide wave coming, and I think it is important to be honest about that because false hope is not an organizing tool. It is a demoralizer. But I want to say something about what civic engagement means in a state like Tennessee because it means something different than it does in Georgia or North Carolina. For Black Tennesseans, this is not about winning a Senate seat in 2026. It is about building something that makes a Senate seat possible in 2032. It is about municipal elections. It is about school boards and city councils and county commissions. It is about being present in the rooms where local decisions get made, zoning decisions, police department budgets, public school funding formulas. You do not abandon a field because the crop failed this season. You repair the soil. And Tennessee's Black community cannot afford to wait for a statewide wave. They must build from the ground up, one local office, one community board, one municipal election at a time. Let me bring this back to where we started because we've covered a lot of ground and I want to make sure none of it gets lost in the volume. The numbers don't lie. The gender gap is real and it matters. The Black voter loyalty numbers are shifting, and the distinction between preference erosion and mobilization failure matters enormously. The Black male voter drop is the most significant demographic shift of the modern era, and it deserves an honest, non-defensive conversation. The economy is the central issue, and the communities most affected by federal cuts are Black communities. The battleground map is narrow, the math is steep, and every single vote counts. But here is what I want to leave you with before we move into the rest of this package. Data is not destiny. I have said that before, and I mean it more tonight than I ever have. Data describes where we are. It does not determine where we go. What happens between now and November 3rd, 2026 is not written in any poll or any Pew report. It is written by people. People who get up, people who show up and do the work. And that has always been the answer. It is still the answer tonight. Stay with me. We're not done yet. Let's move to this next segment. And this next segment, I'd like to talk to you guys about some of these main points that was mentioned here as I was doing this commentary. And the first thing I want to start with is the gender gap in the voting behavior, because this is something that I think is very important. It's one of those things that we all have to make sure we're paying attention to, because if we're not paying attention to this, then we're not really doing ourselves any good. So let me just start off with this. And when I mentioned the part where men are sitting 41% Democrat and 42% Republican, then that's nationally. And where the women are 45% Democrat and 33% Republican, and that's the 12-point gender gap divide that we were talking about. And so with the House being 220 to 2015, well, 215, that's Republican to Democrat, and with that 12 points, which is the entire ball game, that means this. Yeah, simply you can say that Democrats need to get 5-6 seats in order to take control. Well, in doing that, Democrats are going to have to do a lot of work. They're going to have to do a lot of work. And again, I want to go up before I get into this. Let me just make sure that I let you guys know one thing. I am partisan, and I've always been partisan. I'm not partisan. I've been not a part of either of these parties because I do not support either party. But in just looking at this data, this is where I just want to make sure that I tell you guys what it's stating, but also try to explain it as best as I possibly can. So I was just saying, Democrats need at least these 6 seats to take over, as the new leaders in the House. And so in order to do that, and seeing that men are just 41 to 42% in favor of the Republican Party, this means that Democrats are going to need to, at some point, they're going to need to get down in that grind, and they're going to have to talk to these men that they want these votes from. And so at this point, I have to say, they have not done the job that they should have been doing. And because they have not been doing that job, and you see that when you've got in this particular part, when it comes to gender, how this has tightened the way it has, this could be a break either way. This could be a break either way. But this is where the independent voters come in. And the independents will decide this. So if they want to do all the things that they need to do, and they really want people to come and vote for them in the Democratic Party, they've got to do some work. And, I don't know if it's too late and when did it actually start where, they were out doing this outreach to people in the community. I'm not sure when that took place. But I will say this. They are definitely late. They're late, and they've got to work. They've got to work. The gender gap isn't curiosity. It is the single most structurally significant trend in this midterm cycle, and the party that figures out how to speak honestly to men without abandoning women wins. That's exactly right. So if they want to have that opportunity is there. If they want to be authentic when they go out and they are actually talking to these men, they've got to come, they've got to bring it. Ooh. Excuse me. They've got to bring it because this is not where they need to be. And right now, a lot of these races that have started out at a distance, as we get closer to November, they're all tightening. They're all tightening. And so this right here is about, who's got the best lip service is going to win. That's all I can say. And it's not about what's right or what's wrong, but that's what's going to happen. And so women are voting. Women are voting like they know what's at stake. Healthcare, Medicaid, reproduction rights, all of those good things. Now, what I have to say is, as pointing out earlier in that commentary, women are the ones most likely that are dealing with the healthcare situations. They're the ones that's dealing, with the things that they want back, which are reproductive rights. That is affordable healthcare. And having the access to the different parts of the system that were there before they were turned away. Now, I understand that. But my thing is this. How many of you out there that's listening that are men actually get out and do the things that you see your wife or an advocate that's in your community doing? And the reason why I ask that question is because when that question is asked, it is asked of to know as to, are you really doing the real serious due diligence of making sure that the people in your community has got everything that he or she needs or what they need in order to survive? Because, when you don't have health care, then, if you don't have your health care, then, that's going to be a problem because, these premiums now are so high and they are actually doing like an enormous amount of things with this. And it's one of those things that, you've got to get better with, but you've got to get better with this because, when we're talking about affordability, I think you guys need to make sure that you are actually looking to see who is doing what. Because I think an enormous amount of what you will find out is you need to find out who's actually, for your health care. Who's doing what's necessary and right in order for you to have the health care that's a right here in this country. And so as the health care is a right, it's being changed by particular folks or groups where they're saying that, healthcare is not a right where, you have to earn that. And so my thing is this, as this gets further into this, I'm going to tell you, I think a lot of you guys need to look at those issues, when it comes to the healthcare, the economics, and things of that nature, because I think it honestly does a lot to help you to understand what it is exactly that's going to benefit you and your family, because that's the most important thing. And right now we know that, with the Affordable Health Care Act not being what it was, and we also know that gas prices are continuously going high. Jobs are continuously being cut. And with that happening and everything that you buy retail wise, the prices are still going up. And so there are most things that the everyday person cannot afford. and people are speaking that they want to change. I'm going to say this. For those of you that want that change and you're really serious about it, then we need to see you at the polls. We need to see you at the polls because it is so obvious. So obvious that if we stay on this trajectory, healthcare is going to be null and void for people that's middle class and lower because we can't afford it. And affordability means a whole lot. Now, let me tell you guys when I say talk about this voter loyalty. Now, I'm going to tell you this because, again, as I say, people say they won't change. This midterm election is going to show who wants to change. And let me tell you what I mean by that when I say that. What I'm talking about is I can guarantee you that Black people are going to show up to the polls because they know that that difference needs to be made. The thing is, everybody else that's talking, we need you to put your money where your mouth is. Put your money where your mouth is. Go make that difference and don't even worry about it. If you can't make that difference and you don't want to make that difference, again, that's on you. But I will say this. If you're one of those people and you decide that you don't think a change is in order, you don't think it's needed, what I would like to do is I would love to hear from you because the stuff that you'll be talking about, I want to know what that is, what that means. I want to know how we can make that work for everybody. But that's not the case. So, you guys say you want that change. We want to see you make that change. Get out there and do what you got to do. You have to go make it happen. Now, Black voter support went from 92% Democrat in 2020 to 85% in 2024. And now in July 26, Pew is showing 68% before you panic at that number, ask this. Is this preference erosion or mobilization failure? You know, I'm going to tell you, it could be a little bit of both, but I think it's more so on the mobilization failure. And I think that's more the mobilization failure because these people are not going out to get out into these communities where their constituents are and actually talking to these people and letting them know intentions as to how they feel. But, you know, the Democratic Party's got a lot of things going on. You know, so, you know, they're being asked, they're being targeted about socialism, which I don't know why, but they're being targeted with that. And along with a whole lot of other things. And it's rolling newer and newer people into office. So in 2024, the bigger problem wasn't vote switching. It was people staying home from exhaustion, okay, because it's not enough a defection. It's not a defection, but the exhaustion can cost you the same number of seats. So in other words, if Democrats don't get out there and do what they need to do, especially if they're talking about, they're giving folk all this mouth service about the work that they're going to do, if they're not going to go out and they're not going to meet their constituents and pull these people into the tent because they say they're a big tent, pull the people in. Pull them in. Tell them what you're about, because I think doing what you're doing is not going to get you. But then what makes it even worse is that you'll tell this lip service to a lot of folk just to get that vote. And when you get that vote, they don't see you again. So I want to say that when we talk about this black voter situation, we do know that the support and the rise of the black vote is going to be very, very high. But I'm keeping my eyes out open on Fulton County, as mentioned in the commentary. And I'll tell you why I'm keeping my eyes on Fulton County. It's because in this sector here of Metro Atlanta, that includes Fulton, Cobb, DeKalb, Gwinnett, Douglas. What's the other one out there? Well, anyway, there's like I think it's like 8 counties that make up Metro Atlanta, but Fulton County will be leading the way. That's going to be interesting to see exactly how this works, because people need to make sure that they're out and voting, and they know where they're going to go vote, because it was one of the things that I put in my blog post. And what I put in that blog post was also where people should go in order to vote. It's got the dates. It's got all of those good things in that blog post, especially here where we're talking about here in Fulton County, or we're talking about Metro Atlanta. And the reason why that is there is because a lot of people still don't know to this day where they actually go vote. Now that's crazy. And so, but that's also got something to do with the folks trying to shake this up and make things a little bit difficult, so people don't know where they're voting and things of that nature. And so I'm just going to say, if people are truly doing what they need to do and they are going to go vote, I'm going to tell you, make sure that you do it. So let me just tell you this, so you'll understand, especially people here in Georgia. October 6th, okay, is the last day for voter registration. October 6th, and of course the voter registration has to be done, and all that has to be done in that time frame. November 3rd is the actual election day. November 3rd, and so that doesn't just November 3rd is not just for Georgia, but that's the entire country. And so where we're at on that is that people need to make sure that they are actually out, that they are registered to vote. They go and vote. I mean, you've got early voting, you've got mail-in voting, you've got day of voting. I always suggest to anybody to always try and go to early voting, because I only early vote. I only early vote. I do not go wait for election day in order to go and vote. Bank my vote early. And so I think that's what people need to be thinking about. But the key part of what we're talking about with what's on the line here with this midterm elections is we're talking about the economic impact on communities of color. And 18.5% of the federal workforce is Black. And that is, of course, we know that's not a coincidence, but that 18.5% is comparable, well, actually was a little bit better than what you have on the private sector, which is only 12% of Black employment. So we've got some work to do around this country, because there are several people, one, that's been kicked out of jobs unnecessarily for whatever reasons may have been. But these are things I think that, being here in America, you have to make this right. You have to make this right, because if you don't, then that's other repercussions, economically as we go down the line. 21% of the Medicaid people, for Medicaid, 21% of those people are Black. I think that's a pretty significant number. With that, I'm saying I think this is something we have to work on, and we have to make this better as well, because you got to remember, with these folks have taken away your health care, Healthcare is gone. So now you're trying to make it right. States here in the South in particular, the majority of them didn't even buy into the exchange, which means they didn't expand Medicaid, Medicare. And so you still paid an uptick in price compared to other folk around others in other states in different regions of the country, because they not only paid into the exchange, they expanded the Medicaid and healthcare, and their people were getting health insurance at little to no price, no cost. And that's what everybody wants. The opportunity to get that great health care, but also be able to live your life and not have to worry about, if you got to spend so much on health care. And so this goes also into the effect of when we're talking about the inflation, because so we can remember this is the second year of the Trump administration. Under Biden, inflation was down to 3%. Inflation is now up to 3.5% under this administration. So that says there's a lot of things that's missing that's causing a lot of problems. So it's one of those things that you have to actually make sure you're paying attention to. And when we talked about the states that we're talking about, I wanted to focus on in particular, I wanted to focus on Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Now, the reason why I picked those three states is for three reasons. That is, one, we know that the makeup of Georgia makes it unique to the other two. But, everything is in play. North Carolina, the makeup of it is unique as well, and everything is at stake when it comes to it. But Tennessee does not have that kind of problem. In Tennessee has a supermajority. That's in its state house, its state senate, and in the governor's seat. So there's no battleground coming, but what that means is that we have to focus on Tennessee for the reason of looking and learning that the people there are basically are under some serious kind of repression. It's like that Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana repression and Texas repression, where it's this serious repression that actually takes away from what these people, what their citizens not only need, but how they can make their lives better. And so, with that being said, I mean, when you look at Georgia is like right there where looks like Democrats are knocking on the door, because it looks like Keisha Lance Bottoms is looking good in what she's doing in her gubernatorial race. And so November 3rd is going to be a big indicator of that. And the whole world's watching that, because if Georgia actually goes for Keisha Lance Bottoms, then we can just imagine that's what's going to happen across the country, is that there's just going to be a roll. There's just going to be a roll. But this don't happen if you don't go vote. You have to vote. You have to vote. So, with that being said, let me go into a deeper dive here into Georgia, because Georgia's got a lot of things that connect with so many other states, such as with the electorate being 30% Black. That in itself makes Georgia very, very unique compared to other states. But the thing is, Are they out courting these votes? Because it doesn't look like, for most of these folk, that they're trying to do anything that's remotely close to something that's moral and something that's right. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get us to this point now where we can go ahead and we're near the end. And what I like to do at this point is I would love to do an actual reflection, and that reflection is going to be where I would love to sit here and tell you guys some things here that relates to the great historical figure, Mr. Frederick Douglass. And this is called Standing at the Same Crossroads by Frederick Douglass. End vote. End the vote. It's Standing at the Same Crossroads, end the vote. So, this is a quote from Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Frederick Douglass wrote those words in 1857. 63 years before the 19th Amendment, 118 years before the Voting Rights Act. He wrote them from the position of a man who had been legally defined as property, who had escaped that definition through his own will. Not only was this at his own will, this was his intellect, and who spent the remainder of his life in the urgent, relentless work of demanding freedom, demanding recognition, demanding the full humanity of an entire people from the nation that had built its prosperity on their bondage. Douglass was not a man who waited for conditions to improve. He was a man who understood that conditions only improve when people organize, mobilize, and demand. He understood that the ballot was not a privilege granted by the powerful. It was a tool forged by the hands of those who refused to remain powerless. As I sit here in August of 2026, looking at a July Pew Research report showing Black Democratic identification at 68% and Black male voter turnout declining in consecutive election cycles, I cannot stop hearing Douglass in the back of my mind, because what I see in these numbers is not the story of people who have been defeated. It is the story of people who have a significant number stop demanding, and I understand why. When you have demanded for decades, when you have marched, voted, organized, you registered, you knocked on doors, driven people to the polls, and then watched the very infrastructure designed to protect your community get dismantled through budget reconciliation bills and executive workforce reductions. Exhaustion is not weakness. It is a human response to a system that has tested human endurance beyond reasonable limits. I understand that exhaustion. Douglass understood it too. He carried it himself. But here's what Douglass also understood, and what I believe we must reckon with plainly in 2026. The cost of disengagement is paid by the disengaged. When Doge cuts hit federal workforce, and 18.5% of those workers are Black, when Medicaid reductions land on a population where Black Americans represent 21% of all enrollees, when the budget bleeds into Black neighborhoods and Black families absorb the wound, the people who chose not to demand paid for that silence. with their health care, their jobs, their stability, and their future. Power did not concede anything. It never does. It only responds to demand, and demand requires showing up. It requires the vote as instrument, the organizing as discipline, and the community as the unit of power. That is what Douglas built. That is what he demands of us across the distance of 169 years. So here's the challenge. Here's the challenge I leave with you. In Douglas's spirit and in my own, Douglas did not just speak. He organized, he voted, he built institutions, he demanded loudly, persistently, at personal cost and personal risk, because he understood that the alternative to demanding was accepting. And he would not accept, neither can we, between now and November 3rd, 2026. Every one of us who claims to be in the tradition of Frederick Douglass must ask ourselves, am I speaking or am I demanding? Am I watching or am I working? Because the numbers are asking that question of us right now, and history is waiting on the answer. What will you do? Well, I want to thank you guys for spending this time with me. I want you guys to go and check out my blog. That is changingtrendsandtimes.wordpress.blog.wordpress.com. I need you guys to go and check out that blog, because that blog that actually is relative to this show tonight is to give you guys a little bit more of an understanding and to help you to know that this is where things are standing at this point. This is why we need to be ready to move into November 3rd, and we need to do what we're supposed to do. And as I said, all eyes will not just be on just the national election. There will be an enormous amount of national eyes on Georgia when we talk about November 3rd, because Georgia actually has the chance of doing some things that are really, really great. So as long as that potential is there, I'm happy with that. But we also want to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So let me go out with a closing monologue. And I will say, for those of you that are watching on all of our channels, if you have not yet subscribed, especially our YouTube channels, I ask if you will please support us and subscribe to our YouTube channels, enable all notifications where you're able to go back and watch each and every episode that we have ever produced, as well as you're able to get the shows live when we go live. So let me close with this monologue. Before I let you go, we covered a lot of ground tonight. The gender gap, Black voter loyalty, and what it really means and what it doesn't. The Black male voter shift and the hard questions we have to be willing to ask ourselves. The economy and the budget cuts and who bleeds when Washington tightens the belt. Georgia and North Carolina and Tennessee and the Senate math and the House math and what all of it adds up to between now and the first day or the first Tuesday in November. We sat with Frederick Douglass and let him remind us that what demanding actually looks like. That was a lot to carry, and I want you to know that I appreciate you riding with me through every bit of it, because none of that was easy and none of it was supposed to be. If it was easy, it would matter this much. It will matter this much. Before I let you go, I want to ask you one thing of you, just one. Don't let tonight be a listening experience. Let it be a launching experience. Take one concrete action before November 3rd, just one, but make it real. Register someone who isn't registered. Drive somebody to the polls who doesn't have a way. to get there. Have the conversation at the barbershop, at the church, at the kitchen table, the real conversation, the one with the actual numbers in it. The one where you don't let people off the hook and you don't let yourself off the hook either. Share this episode, share it with your people, and go read my midterm blog post. I put everything in there, the framework, the data, the argument. Read it, share it, and bring it to your communities. That post is a tool. Use it like one. I started tonight at my desk here in Lithia Springs, Georgia, feeling the weight of this moment. I still feel it, but I also feel something more, something that has always been bigger than the weight, something that doesn't show up in any part of Pew Research report or economic projection. I feel the capacity of this. Community to the rise when it is called. I have seen it in Georgia. I've seen it in North Carolina. I have seen it everywhere that people decided that enough was enough. And that the demand would be made. That capacity is still here. It never left. It just needs to be reminded of itself. And that is right. That is it right there. Is exactly what this show is for. Until the next time, stay awake, stay engaged, and remember, your voice is your vote, and God bless you. You and your vote is your power. This is MIBW. I'm Charles Zachary King.